people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard that unbeaten amateur world champion Ayton has signed a promotional deal with Matchroom, a fighter who I've heard in some circles called the next Katie Taylor, though much younger than Katie Taylor was when she signed her promotional pact with Matchroom. Bristol super bantamweight set for pro debut this summer, teenage amateur sensation Ayton will turn professional with Hearn's Matchroom Boxing after the 18-year-old put pen to paper on a long-term promotional deal. The super bantamweight from Bristol is set to make her pro debut this summer following the conclusion of a glittering career in the amateurs in which she amassed an impressive, unblemished 21-0 record. Ayton, trained by Dean Lewis out of the Weston Warriors ABC and managed by Brian Peters, who also manages Katie Taylor, won the Haringey Box Cup in June of last year at the 60-kilogram lightweight limit, stopping her opponents in the semifinal and final, which is saying a lot because you don't often see knockouts in the amateurs, and you don't always see knockouts in the women's game. She went on to claim gold in the 57-kilogram weight category at the World Championships in Colorado, USA, in November, defeating India's Anjali Singh via a unanimous decision in the final. A five-time national champion, Ayton was brought into Sky Nicholson's camp as a sparring partner ahead of the Aussies' WBC featherweight world title clash with Tiaria Brown in Sydney. As well as an outstanding career in amateur boxing, Ayton also excelled in several other combat sports, becoming a world champion in kickboxing and Muay Thai at the age of just 10. I've always wanted to turn pro with Hearn since I was a little girl, said Ayton. I think he's got a message from me from like 3 or 4 years ago where I asked, one day, can you sign me? Today is the day I'm signed with him. I did get offered a Team GB contract, but I turned it down because I don't suit the amateur style. I thought I may as well turn pro. I want those belts. I've had over 300 fights, and I'm undefeated in amateur boxing. I think it's time to step into the pros now. I've always had a professional style in the amateurs. I believe I'm destined for greatness in the pro game. Why not start now while I'm young? I sit on my shots and I'm powerful. I don't jump around a lot, and I'm not tippy-tappy. I think the young fighters coming through the ranks just keep getting better and better every year. It's our time to shine. I hope to make my professional debut in June or July. Hopefully you'll see me then. I plan to make a statement. Fans will like watching me because I knock people out, and I'll keep it entertaining for you lot. I think I can become an undisputed world champion, winning a few world titles in a few different categories. Ayton is destined to become the next superstar of women's boxing, said Matchroom Sport Chairman Hearn. Her amateur record across multiple combat sports, not just boxing, is astounding, and she is hungry to get her professional boxing career underway as soon as possible. Tia could have waited for the Olympic Games, but she believes she will become a multi-weight world champion, so there was no point in delaying. This is going to be an incredibly exciting journey, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for her. What the future holds for Matchroom. Some have speculated that with the migration of one or some of Matchroom's Valkyries, their stake in the women's game is receding. I didn't agree with this. The feeling that Matchroom is not as invested as they used to be in the women's game, and they're not staging as many women's bouts as they used to. And the optics of both an undisputed champion and a unified champion, an unbeaten one, leaving them for MVP, I understand where the sentiment comes from, but I always felt that what Matchroom is actually doing is refining their methods and revamping their stable. Taking what they've learned and refining their methods to not just promote women boxers, but promote ticket sellers. That's the next phase. And If one or some of the Valkyries they've been promoting decide to leave them in search for greener pastures, that's on them. But I haven't forgotten who really got the ball rolling. There's a lot of recency bias, and people tend to forget that the renaissance you're now seeing was kick-started by Matchroom. And that doesn't mean that there weren't others that contributed before them, but a lot of what you're seeing now has to do with their promotion of Katie Taylor, Chantel Cameron, Savannah Marshall, Shannon Courtenay, Ebony Bridges, Ellie Scottney, Terry Harper, Sandy Ryan. Tell me, before Matchroom, how many major promotional outfits with a major broadcast deal hosted a stable of that many women boxers? Matchroom helped to normalize signing women boxers and featuring them on big-time bouts in the postmodern era. Now Golden Boy's got girls and Top Rank's got girls. Boxer, and of course, MVP, Most Valuable Promotions, that right now arguably has the strongest stable of women boxers in the entire industry, but they didn't get there on their own. A big part of that is the work that Matchroom already put in. They definitely helped to pave the way, and I'll go as far as saying that they've been instrumental to the growth we've been seeing in the women's game the last 6 or 7 years. It's undeniable. I do not think that women's boxing would be where it is now if not for the efforts from Matchroom, and I don't think they get enough credit for that. MVP is doing fantastic things in the women's game right now, but the precursor to all of that are the fighters that Matchroom promoted, normalizing that conversation that the women can put on just as entertaining a fight as the men. And as stated, I never thought that their stake in the women's game was receding so much as they're refining their methods and updating their stable. Because I noticed that they signed unbeaten up-and-comer in the lightweight division, Elif Ternan. And they just signed amateur standout Tia Ayton. So I don't think they'd still be signing women boxers if they didn't have a stake in that anymore. We're going to talk a little bit more about Tia and what will be her campaign in the super bantamweight division, where she means to become an undisputed champion. We'll talk more about that in another video. Now, for now, this is a fantastic signing, and for me, it's confirmation of what I already thought. They're refining their methods and revamping their stable. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, WBO President Gustavo Olivieri released a PSA yesterday addressing any rampant bigotry we might be seeing in the sport. Many celebrities believe that trash talking will attract followers, and they may be correct. But such trash talking should never devolve into comments about race. Racism should not be tolerated in any language. If you are a world champion, your skill will do the talking for you. That attracts followers as well. If you are a racist, the WBO is no place for you. To hell with racism. Who the cap fits, let them wear it. Seemingly addressing Teofimo, let's be honest, that's who that was for, but it reads like a warning shot. He didn't mention him by name, and he didn't go after him outright, because Teofimo's playing a game where he's throwing a stone, then hiding his hand. He knows what he means when he makes all these references to monkeys and bananas. He knows whose feathers he's trying to ruffle. And what sounded a lot like flagrant use of a racial slur in a video featuring him and his father as Teofimo worked the heavy bag. Teofimo's explanation was that he was saying, "Where's the liquor at? Where's the liquor at?" But I really don't buy that. I think Teofimo harbors resentment and ill will towards black fighters when he sees that Shakur Stevenson makes more money than he does. So does Devin Haney. He resents them for that. He feels entitled. That is where the resentment comes from, in tandem with a growing desire to get more attention, in this instance, by playing the heel and being the bad guy, taking cues from Ryan Garcia, who last year got a lot of attention for his racist tirade. Teofimo is following suit. Why did all of a sudden Teofimo turn into Jim Crow? It's because he saw Ryan do it. Though he's not being quite as brazen as Ryan was last year, and for that, the WBO can't castigate him outright. All they can do is fire a warning shot. What may have sounded like a racial slur to many, many people, and that's what I think it was, Teofimo explains it, a misunderstanding. What I think Teofimo is misunderstanding is that unless you just come out with it. People know what you're doing, what you're trying to do, but you won't say it outright. You'll do it, ruffle everybody's feathers, then try to explain it away, almost apologizing. You may as well be, because if this is you trying to be the heel, you're not committing to the role, you're not committing to the character, not if you keep explaining it away, and for that, a lot of people don't respect you. The ones whose feathers you're trying to ruffle, and the ones watching you go back on it. These tumultuous times where racial tensions are rising, the racists and the bigots themselves do want a poster child, a spokesman to say all the things they don't say in public, the things they're afraid to, for fear they're going to get their asses kicked. And Teofimo doesn't service as the poster child for them because he's not fully committing to the role that he's playing, so he just comes off as an indecisive pussy and a try-hard. Because what has he been doing all these months if not trying hard, trying so hard to get attention on himself, going as far as presenting himself as a bigot? Though I don't think it's all presentation, I do think Teofimo genuinely, underneath the skin, is a racist. To go in this direction for any reason requires you to already be comfortable with certain ways of thinking, certain thought processes that would seem extreme to someone else, though not to you, because you're a racist, and in doing so, well, you're just being honest. Watching Ryan Garcia do it last year made it that much easier for Teofimo, to be honest.
Nathan, is a lot of Teo questions. Nathan, please confirm,
Yeah.
quote unquote, even if Teo used the N-word, end quote, is he protected by the Freedom of Speech Act? Or since the WBO is based outside of the USA, it doesn't apply and the WBO can strip him? Also, remember, Teo has had multiple infractions.
Yeah, true. No, remember Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so technically we are subject to U.S. jurisdiction and federal laws also and state laws. So that's a terrific question. The freedom of speech is not an absolute right. There are certain restrictions as to exercising the right to free speech, whether it's the location, the extent of that free speech, etc. That's a very good question. I would need to carefully analyze the nature of those remarks, the extent of those remarks, in the context of those remarks. So it's not an easy assessment. And again, if I have to take more affirmative actions, I will do so.
You have to file this under workplace etiquette. How do you behave in the workspace where you still have your freedom of speech? You can say what you want, but freedom of speech does not equate to freedom of consequence. There are consequences to what you say within the workspace, so that if you're making offensive comments about an ethnic group or a race, a religion, and that does not align with that company's views that you represent, they can so reserve the right to terminate your employment on that premise. With Teofimo, he's a public figure, and as WBO champion, he is an ambassador of that sanctioning body. But if he begins behaving in such a way that alienates the other WBO champions, the other ranked contenders, I think the WBO has it within their power to strip him. It's not so much a question of whether or not they can, so much as do they have enough? Do they have enough evidence against him to do it? And I don't think they do. It's very clear what Teofimo Lopez means without him saying it outright. So because he isn't saying it outright, and it's open to interpretation, it's hard to use that, just that, against him. Should they? The PSA from Gustavo, and him making an appearance on the Boxing Voice to field questions about it, is the warning shot that he better curb his enthusiasm and keep his behavior in check, what language we find in his lexicon while he says this and that on his social media. It's tantamount to letting him know that they've got their eye on him, they're gonna be paying attention, so he should too. And for all of the patriots worried about his freedom of speech, well, he still has it, but freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. Freedom of speech may be your right, but not being WBO champion, that's up to them. It's not your right to behave however you feel like while representing that sanctioning body. That's not an entitlement. Proceed at your own peril. You want to let people of a certain group know how you really feel. The pendulum swings both ways. They can do that with you, and they're not the only ones that can either. It's tantamount to workplace etiquette, and within that space, you are subject to certain parameters, even with all of your freedom of speech.
We said, hell yeah, we'll take that fight. And we said, hey, look, and this was more than what Ron said. We was willing to take his fight next. Boots. We'll fight him whenever he's ready to fight. I said that. I said, whenever his next fight, when he willing to fight, we'll fight him. That's what I said, right? All of that stands to be true. So now, I don't know what kind of cards Eddie trying to pull or whatever else. The fight is agreed upon. The fight is verbally agreed upon. What he wants to do, and also the only thing now, this ain't no ducking type thing. The only thing now is he's trying to negotiate the fight before my son's fight. We ain't doing that. That's just not good business. He wants us to negotiate a fight and sign a contract for a fight while we already have a fight. When in every interview that Jerron said before his fight, I'm locked in on Stanionis. That's all I'm worried about. When he was asked about my son, when he was asked about anybody, he didn't even say as much as what we saying. We said we want to fight the nigga. He wouldn't even say that. We saying that we do want to fight. So we said, yeah, we do want to fight. We said he next, but we got an opponent that we got to deal with. We got to go to Japan. You know what I'm saying? We're doing something nobody else doing. We got to go deal with that. And we going to negotiate the fight after that. So I'm not sure what the question is or what the fuck we talking about. Is the fight next? Hell yeah. We not signing no contract or even negotiating it until after our fight. Simple.
The idea that you can't commit to one fight while going into another is malarkey, because we just saw Canelo Alvarez do that. Before the William Skull fight, he went into it, having already agreed to the Terence Crawford fight thereafter that he's about to have in September. So it can be done, and it has been done. And all Brian is telling us here is that Eddie wants assurances that they will fight, because his fighter is now faced with a decision. He knows he's not going to get a crack at the green and gold title. Whether Mario wins or Manny wins, there's a good chance he don't get that belt. So the last one is yours. He needs to know if it's worth staying in the welterweight division, because he has a mandatory challenger in the queue, and he wants some assurances from you that you want to unify too, which would then justify fighting him, fighting Gayasov. But if the Gayasov fight is not followed with a unification match, then why even have it? Why work so hard to keep belts you're not going to get to unify? That's what that is. Why are the Normans flying halfway around the world for a guy without a belt is a better question. You didn't want to fight Boots in Philadelphia last year. That wouldn't have required you to leave the country, but you leave it for Jin Sasaki?
I wonder if that came up.
What's encouraging is that Brian Norman Sr. is saying that will be the next fight after the Jin Sasaki fight. But do you trust him? Can you take Brian Norman Sr. at his word? Ken Jaron Ennis, Ken Eddie Hearn, because these guys have wasted enough time dancing around this fight.
The best case scenario is Boots handles Shakram Gayasov, Brian handles Jin Sasaki, then they meet in the fall. That's the best case scenario.
But how confident are you guys out there that it will happen that way?